One thing I would like to know is, does everybody here have a pen? It's going to be a little interactive tonight, so I'm just hoping everybody can follow and have a pen and ready for some. And do you have the dependent origination chart? So the Upanisa Sutta basically is taking not only dependent origination, but also is talking about the other fold of what we do with dependent origination. So dependent origination is a really good elaboration on the first two noble truths, basically. The truths of Dukkah and the truth of the origin of Dukkah. In what I will be reading tonight is a translation of mine, so terms are perhaps a little bit different, but I will connect them with the classical terms and offer you perhaps a different perspective on it. And I just want to say that the classical definition of all of these terms is also valid. I am not discrediting them. I'm just offering perhaps a different perspective on it. So, and then the second fold of this is what to do to come out of the first two noble truths, because the first two noble truths is really good to know them, but if we were to stop there, then it would be pretty bland. So we need to know what the third and the fourth noble truths are. And if you've seen Bhante Ramsey at the end of retreat pictures and things like that, he would always do this mudra, actually. For him, that represented the third noble truth, which is the cessation of dukkha, the cessation of trouble. And usually I call dukkha trouble. You'll notice in my own translations. Suffering is one word that we can use for it, but dukkha actually only means unpleasant. There's all kinds of other words in Pali for the word suffering. And so we need to know also how to break free from this. So that's why I usually call this talk the origination of liberation. So we have dependent origination, but there's also a way out of this. There's also a way out from craving, from clinging, from all of these beautiful words. And actually there's a way to let that go. And the sequence I like the most that represents that is a sequence that we find a lot throughout the suttas. And this is a sequence that I talked about at the university in Mumbai. I call it the gladness, the collectiveness, which is basically another way to speak about the 7 supports of awakening, this 7 sambhojangas. So it goes like tasime pancha nivarane pahine atani samanupassato. So one who sees that the 5 hindrances have been let go within. Pamoja jayati, then there is gladness, relief that arises. Pamuditassa piti jayati. From that relief, from that gladness comes joy, that piti. Piti manasa kayam pasambati. So from that joy, the body relaxes, it calms down. Pasadakayo sukhang vedayati. Right? I'm always a little bit confused with this one. So when the body calms down, one experiences ease or happiness, basically. Sukhino chittang samadhiyati. Then with this ease within the body, or this happiness, the mind becomes collected. And this is really, I usually take a lot of time in my own retreats to really make sure that this is well understood, because this is very foundational to our practice. This sequence is found throughout the suttas, and it literally, black and white, puts it in front of us. This is how the mind gets collected. It's actually talking about letting go and joy and relaxing, which is really interesting. And this is found like a lot in the suttas. So this sutta actually takes it a little bit further than this. This is just a little introduction that I like to give because it's a little bit more simple. But we will go through each stages of this upper part of the path. I like to call it the transcendental part of the whole process, because we actually transcend samsara, dependent origination, which we are kind of rolling in. Or we can be rolling in. There's a way out. So residing, this is in Savatthi, and this is, again, this is my own translation. I'll try to guide you through some of the words that I'm using. I'll explain the Pali, and I'll explain my choice a little bit. Those who've heard this talk from me before, please bear with me and forgive me for repeating myself. I say that, so this is the Buddha speaking, obviously. I say that it is by knowing and seeing, monks, that the mental distractions become still, not by not knowing and not seeing. So one way that I really loved how Bhante Vimalaramsi, my teacher, was explaining a way of translating asavas. The word asavas is like with just the word distraction, basically. Asava, this word comes from the root shru, which means to flow. And now there's a whole big scholarly debate about, is it flowing out or is it flowing in? So some people call it the influxes, some people call it the outfluxes, the effluence, or whatever you want to call it. I like to think that the mind is flowing out towards all kinds of objects. That fits the template of the distractions, basically. And just so you know, this is kind of the understanding that I'm going towards with that. So our mind is kind of flowing to these things. These are the asavas. That's what the Bhikkhu Bodhi would call the taints. Some people call it the corruptions. I like the distractions because it's really pragmatic. It's down to earth, here and now. We can use it, and it's not too scholarly, and we can actually know what we're talking about. So these distractions, when they become still, what the Buddha is talking about here is the Asavakaya, basically, the stopping of these mental movements. So it is by knowing and seeing that this happens. Knowing and seeing what? These are shapes. These are shapes arising. These are shapes passing away. These are felt experiences. These are felt experiences arising. These are felt experiences passing away. These are concepts. These are concepts arising, and these are concepts passing away. These are thoughts. These are thoughts arising. These are thoughts passing away. This is consciousness. This is consciousness arising, and this is consciousness passing away. Knowing and seeing in this way, monks, there is the stilling of the distractions. So basically, it's a pretty strong start with the five aggregates and anicca sanya, basically seeing things as an impermanent flow, basically, of experience. And when we're not latching on to experience, this is what we see, because everything is just arising and passing away. So when there's no clinging, there's nothing keeping anything still within the mind. So the mind is completely open, and the experiences flow even from sensations, consciousness, even perceptions. All of that is just arising and passing away. And when we don't have clinging, then we're able to see that, because we're not clinging to anything. So basically, like I said, this is a pretty strong start. But this is the end result that we're going to go. But from here, this is a way that the Buddha had to explain how certain topics, is that he is going backwards, basically. So how do we get there? But monks, I say, in this stillness, the knowledge of this stilling comes from a cause. It is not independent. So this doesn't happen just by chance or a strike of luck. It does happen arising on a cause, on a condition. What is the cause for the knowledge of this stillness when all distractions are completely let go of? Release should be said, or liberation. This is vimutti, basically. So how do we get to the Asavakaya? So the Asavakaya is what is usually called as a destruction of the taints. And this is what I call here the stilling of distractions, yes. So liberation is the cause for seeing that. So when I explained about having let go of clinging completely, then we see the impermanence is just flowing all the time. There's nothing that we're holding on to. So this is how we see that, this is how we bring all these distractions to an end. What is the cause? What is the cause for release or liberation? Freedom from clinging should be answered, and this is Viraga. This is what I call the Viraga in this sutta. Viraga is also called dispassion, but this is another interesting way of calling this word. This word also means calming down, like in the third jhana, piti cha viraga cha. The joy does not become dispassionate, it calms down. So this viraga is also, another way to interpret that is literally freedom from clinging, because raga is also this a synonym of tanha, which we will come to later. And this is the beauty of the sutta, is that the upper part, which talks about the liberation, relates a lot of point in the lower part of it, so that we can actually go beyond that, transcend that. What is the cause for freedom from clinging? Disengagement should be answered. Now this is nibbida. So this is also called disenchantment, or having enough of something, getting wary of something. In the same way, when we start looking at certain things, some of our experiences, and especially unwholesome states, the more and more we'll have the wisdom to see these unwholesome states as, okay, now I've had enough of this. I've had enough of anger, or I've had enough of this jealousy or whatever, and then, or boredom. That happens a lot in the I see a lot of people smiling, good. So at some point, and the boredom is also a funny one, because it's just another hindrance. So when we realize that boredom is not actually real, it's just the mind coming up with it, and it's making it up, basically. But when we let go of it, see the tension in it, and release and relax it, it's gone. And the boredom was the hindrance. It wasn't anything else. It wasn't like, boredom isn't real. Like, the mind isn't bored, really. It's just imagining that. So, so when we learn to let that go, actually there's a lot of happiness. There's a lot of relief, and it's quite a funny one. That one is doubt. These two are like my favorite ones to work with, because doubt is also a funny one. Doubt will just arise, and one will be thinking like, oh, am I doing this right? what's going on and like, nah, this is not really working. But all this is really taking it personal and believing the hindrance. But doubt is just a hindrance. When you let it go, it's not there anymore. And there's just joy, and there's tranquility and samadhi and steadiness of mind. So the only thing that was hindering a person was just the doubt itself. So it's a funny one. So this disengagement, nibbida, I like this word disengagement because it's really taking a step back out of it. It's another word for letting go, which in this particular sutta we don't talk about viveka, which is a very common word, which I call letting go. It's often called seclusion, but viveka is also about letting go. And nibbida and viveka are very, very, very close, intertwined together. So, what is the cause of disengagement? Discernment should be answered. And this is, if I'm not mistaken, this is yata bhutang jnanadasanam. So, seeing and knowing or understanding things as they are, basically. Usually this would be called, well, the knowledge and vision of things as they are, but that's a pretty long compound with. It's also just discernment. When we start seeing things for what they are, when we start to know wholesome states and their value, and unwholesome states and how unbeneficial they are, then this is what we're talking about here, yata bhutang jnanadasanam. And so it's not, and that requires equanimity, that requires steadiness of mind. Otherwise we can't have discernment. We can't, otherwise we're engaging in the hindrances. So basically this is really important for us to know and see things for what they are. Wholesome states as uplifting, clarifying, steadying, and liberating, and unwholesome states as pulling us down, binding, and heavy, making our mind agitated. And it's like everybody's got an old computer in their life, I'm sure. So how does it feel when you open your old laptop that was like 15 years ago, and it's taking maybe like half an hour to boot, and then it finally gets to the point where there's like an image or something, and then you try to like open Word or something and just like type really like basic something, and it takes like 15 minutes for the line to type. So this is like the same thing that is happening with a mind that is full of hindrances. So of course it's really hard to be happy when we're congested, full of hindrances. Everything becomes hard. It's like going to the grocery store. You'll be just like obsessing and thinking about everything that happened during your work day, and this person said that to you, and there's so much there's so much restlessness. And you know, you go to the grocery store and it's like, should I really take this pear? I think this one is a lot better, but I'm not sure. But then this one is cheaper. So this is Dukkah. But when the mind has no hindrances in it, it doesn't really care about these things. It's like, hey, that looks like a good pear. I'll have that one, and then fill up the cart, and oh, my favorite apples. Oh, great. Oh, my chocolate bars are on sale. That's awesome. Everything becomes like synchronicity or whatever. And the mind that is free from hindrances, you don't need to wish to be happy. You are. That's the definition of a mind without hindrances. But a mind with hindrances, then things get really tough. So this is the beauty of seeing things as they really are. Yatha bhutan jnana dassanam. So basically, this is talking about a mind that is rid of hindrances. Because to see things for what they are, we need a clear mind. And so this is a very happy state to be in. Now, what is the cause of this? What is the cause and condition for discernment? Yatha bhutan jnana dassanam. Anybody has any idea?
What is the cause and condition for?
For the discernment, for the seeing and knowing things as they really are. Yatha bhutan jnana dassanam. Yes. Yes, so I was asking the question. Huh? You've been to one of my retreats? Yes, very good. Mental collectedness should be answered. And what is mental collectedness? Bhante has been talking about it, and it's a really good term that Bhante would use for. Yes, concentration. What would be the Pali for that? Samadhi. Yes. Okay. So now, see, we're starting. Now, this is the point where we're arching back to the beginning stanza or verse that I talked about, the 7 supports of awakening. So this is really interesting also to realize and to notice in our own practice, this mental collectedness, this balance of mind and this unity of mind is the foundation for discernment to arise, is the foundation for seeing things as they really are. Because hindrances are making our mind scattered. That's what the mind does. When a mind is full of hindrances, it's scattered. When the mind is clear, it's bright, it's uplifted, it's trained, developed, like everybody's doing here, then it's collected. And we can see things for what they are. Otherwise, it's like the analogy I use is, well, there's a few, but it's like driving down the road 100 miles per hour, and can you see like the bug that's like walking on the little blade of grass in the ditch, and the little wildlife that's happening, and all these things that are going on outside? It's impossible because, I mean, you're driving 100 miles per hour, and there's no way you're going to see that. And it's the same thing in the mind. When the mind is just so active, it's driving 100 miles an hour, and we can't see these things for what they are. We don't even have a chance. So this is why retreats are really important, because we're having all the right causes and conditions for us to really practice and deepen our wisdom and collectedness, and then bring that home with us. So, what is the cause? But this mental collectedness, this samadhi, comes from a cause. It is not independent. What is the cause for mental collectedness? Happiness should be answered. Happiness or ease, here the word is sukha, basically. I just love that the dependent origination is all the way into dukkha. And then what we're seeing here is the complete opposite. So how do we cultivate sukha? How do we cultivate happiness? Because the Buddha's teaching, I mean, we're talking about suffering or dukkha, but I mean, we're talking about the cessation of dukkha. So what would that mean? What would be the cessation of?
Knowing the truth of the thing as they are.
Yes. And that would probably be pleasant. If there is no suffering, that would probably mean... Yes, right. I mean, it's just funny that I actually heard a monk once saying that the Four Noble Truths are actually understanding what dukkha is, what trouble is. Second is understanding its cause. And then the third is understanding happiness and understanding its cause. But it's the real happiness, not just like going to the corner store and buying like bag of chips and like, ooh. So, I mean, it's great as long as you get the chips and and then you feel like kind of, oh, I'm not sure. So, but this is like the wise way to understand and cultivate happiness. Basically, the Four Noble Truths is like understanding what is causing us pain and trouble, understanding what causes that, and then understanding what is happiness and how to get there, and that's the Eightfold Path, basically. And of course, we're not talking about worldly kind of material happiness. So, but this happiness or ease comes from a cause. It is not independent. What is the cause for happiness? Now this is the test because I said it earlier. Ease is probably easier because it's closer to.
What is the cause of happiness? It's wisdom?
Yes. It's just because I think, yes, so basically I talked about this just before you came in, so you missed it. But but it's okay. No, that's okay. We're gonna say it again anyways. So calm, passaddhi. If you remember, I said this joy brings up calm, and then calm brings up ease or happiness. So and passaddhi is also one of the 7 supports of awakening, one of the bojjhangas. But this calm comes from a cause. It is not independent. What is the cause for calm? Calm, tranquility, the usual. What causes tranquility? And that's part of what I said earlier.
Absence of hindrances.
Absence
of hindrances.
Yeah, that's.
Mental collectiveness, samadhi.
Yes, samadhi. Then there's what creates that is the basis for that is happiness or ease. And then the basis for ease is calm. And then the basis for calm is joy. Yes, piti. So I really like this sequence. It goes from joy, and then it says joy helps calming the body, and then calming the body is the support for happiness or ease. So it's quite it's quite direct. And then this joy comes from a cause. What is the cause of this joy? Relief should be answer, or this is pamoja. Pamoja is, so sometimes the Buddha, this formula is explained in 2 ways. In the long discourses, there is the first chapter where the Buddha will explain many times in a row. There's 12 suttas in a row where the Buddha explains the whole of the path. And this is the Samanyapala Sutta, for those who know it, the fruits of the contemplative life. And when he talks about this, he talks about letting go of the hindrances will bring up relief. And he uses these beautiful similes like coming upon an oasis in the desert. That's how it feels to let go of the hindrances. Coming out of jail, basically, being free from slavery. That's how it feels. What are the other ones?
Coming out of disease.
Yes, being free from illness. Yes, finding health again. Yeah, so these are pretty striking similes. And that's when, in my own translations, that's where I'll translate pamoja as relief. And that's good, Mega, you're there. Uh-huh.
A mom delivering a new baby.
A new baby?
Yeah. The mom.
Yes.
Is delivering to a new baby also. That is sort of example.
I don't think that's one of the
Loan.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Free from debt. Yeah, that's great, isn't it?
Pain, sorrow.
Pain, sorrow, yes. But these, I think now we have the five. There was 5 similes for the 5 hindrances, basically. And these are the ones he gives. But yes, coming out of that. And then the other places where he uses this exact sequence and where he's talking about this gladness to collectedness sequence is when he teaches the recollections, the anusatis, basically, the recollections of the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, the virtues of the awakened ones, basically the 5. It can be more than the 5, but the 5 virtues, basically, the 5 precepts. And generosity, recollecting that. There's also the devas, but I think you guys at the university, you have the Dhatu Puja, and Dr. Yojana has been making the whole sequence, which I'm pretty happy about. But really in the suttas, that's usually what we find is these 5 recollections which bring gladness. And that's when I will translate it as gladness, pamoja as gladness. Because relief, it still works, but it's more like an uplifting kind of recollection that we cultivate. And these suttas are, there's not 1 or 2, there's a lot of them. So it's quite obvious that this is what the Buddha taught. Now I was in relief. And what is the cause for relief? What is the cause for pamoja, or this gladness? Now I haven't told you this one, because now we're taking a little bit of a different path here from my beginning simile, or my beginning stanza. Confidence, this is saddha. Confidence or faith should be answered. So this is where it gets interesting. So now we've started with how to liberate us from the cycle, the unwholesome cycle that we create. But we also need to know how we create this, how we create our own problems, our own troubles. So now we've seen the whole of the path above the transcendental part of it. But now we're going to take the dive into dependent origination itself. And when he talks about saddha, this is also tying in with the anusatis, basically not just recollecting the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, but also finding that in one's life. It's a major source of gaining faith and confidence in the path. So, but what is the cause for this faith to arise? What is the cause for this confidence to arise? Curiosity. Yeah, that's good. It's very close. And this curiosity is often driven by something. If you ask Buddhist monks, usually if you ask Buddhist monks why they decided to go forth and become monks, you're probably not going to get an answer like because they were really in love with the Western style of society and like going to the theater and like nightclubs and all that. So they were starting to see that there was things that were not working for them. And seeing problems. Sometimes, very often, is because one will hit a place in their lives where things need to change. And that's because things are going a little bit... there needs to be answers. There needs to be another way that is found. So, and this is the beginning of the seeking, the beginning of the curiosity, the beginning of looking for the truth. So basically, what is the cause for this faith to arise? Trouble should be answered. So this is where Dukkah comes into play. And now we're starting with the end of dependent origination. But it's kind of a cliche, like, why did you become a monk? Well, like this and that happened, and like all these problems happened, and then I just went forth and then tried to find another way because it needed to change, something like that. I mean, I have like past old friends that, it's so cliche, like they saw that I had all this hardship in my life, and then I became a Buddhist monk, and I was like, look at you, man, like you're a Buddhist monk. So it took, and they're still digesting it even after like 4-something years. So it's kind of a cliche, but it's true. That's what happens basically. A lot of the time, not every time, but a lot of the times. Encountering dukkha in one's life, there's 2 possible ways. There is sensory gratification, or either searching, questing, seeking for the truth. So I guess this is more closer to what I was saying here. And another way of talking about faith, because this word saddha can, faith, or like gaining faith, or like, there's another Pali word for that, and it's called samvega. Basically having the sense of urgency arising, because then we're like, okay, so something's off here. Like, and it seems like there's a lot of great monk stories anyways from people that I know that have become monks or nuns even. It seems like a whole bunch of karmic events just happen in their life to just like push them towards like this. And this is probably part of their karma from previous times. Just making sure that they would keep on track. So this faith is also can be called urgency, samvega. So basically getting the kick to finding the truth, finding a truth, the truth to get out of this. And this doesn't mean like running away. Because I mean, if we're going to say that, then everybody's running away all the time. I mean, just you're running away either in the senses, or you're running away finding an actual solution to this. So hopefully everybody runs in the wise direction. And this is another interesting bit around this transition, because now we're transitioning here into the dependent origination bit, is that's why the Buddha says that like being reborn as a deva is not the best for striving on this path. Because devas have it too good. And that's kind of what I see in the West. So people just have it too good sometimes. And there's not enough dukkha around to keep them in check. So it's just like going from one pleasure to the next, and to the next, and to the next, and to the next. And there's not really like, there's no reality check. There's no reality check. There's no like, it's just, everything is just easy, or like not hard enough to really break it kind of thing. But when you, and that's what I like about not being in the West, is sometimes that's what I've been saying to a lot of people, that it feels more real. It feels like, like I walk, for example, for alms in Sri Lanka, which is a Buddhist country, and it's probably like really amazing conditions to be a monk in. But there's a lot of poverty. Like I go for alms, and I'm pretty sure I got some people's food for the day a few times. So it really it really puts things into perspective when these things happen. And when you have everything you want all the time, then you don't get to see that. You don't get to see how there's how life can be rough a little bit. And so that's why the bodhisattvas are always anyways, in theory, always seeking for a human rebirth, because that's where they can make more, build more their paramis and make more merits. Because in the Devalokas, they can also, but they're just basically, what happens usually is someone will be going to a Devaloka and then have a really long lifetime of blissful experiences and then just wear that out and then come back down. So until they figure out, until they encounter this dhamma, basically to actually see that this is the cycle that's been going on for eons and eons and eons. So this dukkha is actually important. It's important for the development of wisdom. So we need that to a certain extent. And then too much of it also is not good. So it's really interesting to see that. Like if you really were to really completely be sullen down into a whole pile of trouble and suffering, then it would just be very, very difficult to see any kind of way out of it, because we're just overwhelmed by it. So let's move forward. What is the cause for trouble? Oh yes? Avidya. Well, yes, but that's like way down. We're going to get there in 12 links. So yes? Expectations. Oh, this is good. Yes, yes. Yeah. So this would be the birth of action, basically, jati. Which I call here blind reactions. This is just my take for saying the same thing. Basically, the birth of action, from what I understand is, but I need the other step down, so I'll step down here. But these blind reactions come from a cause. They are not independent. So that birth of taking action, basically, it comes from a cause. What is the cause for these blind reactions? Habit patterns should be answered. And this is where Bhante would call this habitual tendencies, right? Okay, so we're talking about, what is the Pali for that? Bhava. Yes, yes. So basically what happens is these habit patterns, they're not conscious. And that's why they're habit patterns. Are these habitual tendencies. They become ingrained within our psyche. And someone will shout a name, and then you'll like get violent, or or you'll retaliate with anger. That's not conscious. And see, that's what also hindrances and unwholesome states are. They are not conscious. And wholesome states are conscious. Loving kindness is conscious. Compassion is conscious. How do you feel when you hold, it's funny, a baby? I know some people said that they had a hard time with the baby example. So maybe, like a Bambi or like an animal or whatever. For me, it's baby goats. So I really like baby goats. When you're caring for a baby goat, for example, you're caring, you're loving, you're attentionate, you're aware of what's going on. You don't want to drop it, you want to care for it. It's coming with awareness. It has awareness in it, naturally. You don't have to you don't have to force it. It just is. That's why we cultivate these states. That's why we cultivate the Brahma Viharas, because they are the most powerful, wholesome human emotions or human sentiments, without becoming sentimental about it, but the most exalted emotions that we can feel as humans, that are the most wholesome. And these come with awareness within them. They have joy and they have calm. They are calming. So these states are all together, they all arise together. But when we get angry, we're not conscious. it's a blind reaction. It's reactionary. So we're not responding, we are retaliating. We are taking a blind action, basically. And there's a few ways of explaining dependent origination. One is here and now, practical, very down to earth, like this is habitual tendencies, there's a birth of action here and now. And this leads to trouble. Obviously, if someone shouts your name, you punch them, then it's likely that it's gonna bring you trouble, like a lot. But it's the same thing when, there's restlessness in the mind. You're doing something and then you're not really conscious, you're just thinking that you have an idea, oh, I want to write this, I want to take it. You stand up and then you break your toe on the side of the table there. I mean, it's less, but it's the same thing. That state that happened, that restlessness, that agitation that arose in the mind took away your awareness. It was just a reaction. There was a way that you could have remained calm, and by cultivating wholesome states, this happens more and more and more. There's more awareness because mind just becomes naturally more aware. But even just standing up and doing things all of a sudden is a reaction. It is a blind reaction, basically. And this comes from habitual tendencies of, basically the habitual tendencies of just maybe a little bit of restlessness sometimes. So I gave the example, that big example of anger and getting violent, but there's also, it's the same thing for the lesser ones. The other way to interpret dependent origination is like transcendental, in a way that it's talking about not just this life, but the next life also. So there would be like a creation of an identity, of a being. And I'll explain a little bit more when I go down this. So I'll maybe offer both sides. Everybody is a little different surprise bag. So when you come in with what you had in the previous existence. I have one of my students in Canada wrote a really good little poem on this, and I will read it to you just a little later but basically when a karmic baggage that we call I migrates from one body to another, whether it's coarser or subtler, then it has all of its karmic baggage within it already. So my sister, I have two nephews, and they're both like so different. One is like his dad, and one is like his mom, and I mean they're born like that. Like I was holding my youngest nephew, and he was a kid, like he was a year and a half, and he had all of his mom's baggage, and he had that from his previous lives. Like he already had his personality to a certain extent. So, and you can see that in some children, like they pick up things, and that's why children are really awesome to help us understand that, is that we can really see dependent origination very clearly within them. Because they'll say something and they'll say, that was your dad. Like, because for them it's just like a sponge. Like they see something that they want. They want to be like their parents, for example, or they want to be like a superhero buddy, or I don't know. And they'll just gonna pick that up, they'll put it in their mind, and they're gonna act like that. And that's kind of a really simple dependent origination. But basically, because they want to be like that, they'll take it, they'll cling to it, and then they'll make it a me, an identity, a habit pattern. And then so when you'll say, do you like chips? I'll say, yeah, I'm a chip guy. but that's probably from his dad or whatever. That's really just an example. Like, don't make it like more than. But this is just an example of how it works. You know, like that child loves their dad, and that's their idol. Basically, they want to be like them. So they're just gonna say things so that they can be closer to that. And that's the same thing. It's like when you grow up, you're told you're gonna have, you have to choose a career, you have to choose a studying field, and then, well, you have to actually really work hard to build up your identity. And so, and especially nowadays, they're gonna really make sure that I'm a doctor, or I'm a mechanic, or like that, yeah, I'm a secretary, or I'm a governor, or whatever you want to call it. But we all associate very strongly with our professions, our everything that we've come to be, because we've worked so hard, like years of studying and all these things to get there. So, blind reactions. Yes. Yeah, to a certain extent. Mindfulness might not be fully rubbed away from you, but it is slightly. It's not totally clear. And see, that's what samadhi means. It's like the opposite of having a scattered or agitated mind, basically. It's unified, it's collected, and it's calm. So, and all of these hindrances, like wanting for sensual whatever, anger, dislike, basically I want it, I don't want it. Right now you're not content. You're not clear. You're not still. You're not present. So just that, and it's not like it's really unwholesome to want a singing bowl, for example, but it's just that it's pulling your mind away from what is now. And because of that, then you're thinking like, oh, I really want to buy a singing bowl, and then boom, you're breaking your toe on the sidewalk. So, I mean, I like the bumping my toe because it happens all the time to me in Sri Lanka when I go for alms in the forest, and then there's a root, and then I don't know, I'm thinking about something, and then yeah, that's it. Here goes my nail. So, but hopefully it doesn't happen to me too much. So this was a big parenthesis on blind reactions, basically how that works, and habit patterns. So habitual tendencies. These habitual tendencies are basically crystallized, and this is where we go to the next one. What is the cause for habit patterns? And this would be in the chain, this would be upadana, this would be clinging, and this is what I call here attachments. Attachments. But these attachments come from a cause, they are not independent. What is the cause for attachments? Wanting should be answered. So this is tanha, craving, wanting. Here, now this is really interesting because all of these hindrances are rooted in this tanha, this wanting. So we're not actually okay with what is now, and this is causing a movement in the mind. So that asava, again, that's where we can start to see it. A lot of you have been experiencing these deeper mental stages where we're talking about the quiet mind or the still mind, where there's barely any distractions anymore. It's like it's seeing before any distractions arise. It's much more subtle now. The mindfulness is sharp enough to 6R, much before a sankhara or a thought can grow to maturity. So there's not really a chance for that, unless one would completely kind of move away from the meditation. But more and more, this will be the experience where the mind becomes very still, and one can tell just how the mind will move a little bit, and it will lean towards something. This is also a way that we can tell that the mind is starting to have a beginning of an inclination towards a distraction, basically. And so we get, awareness is so sharp at this point that we see that before it happens, and then we just let it go. And mind just keeps being very still and quiet. But when this pull that kind of pulls us away from that contented state, sometimes I call it tanha, craving, I call it discontent or dissatisfaction. It's not being okay with what is now. You just you want something else. And that creates any of the other hindrances. So in here and now, this is what I've been explaining. There's a pull, and then that pull becomes stronger, and then there's more tightness around it, and then there's an idea or a full-fledged distraction that arises from past conditions, basically. In the transcendental way of seeing it from one lifetime to another, this wanting, this not being okay with what is now, this wanting, the more we do it, it turns into these attachments. We just develop attachments like, yeah, I'm a chip guy, or I'm a chocolate guy, or I'm a BMW person, I'm a Ferrari person. So this is craving accumulating. This is another way we can see upadana, is this accumulation. And then whether it is attachments or things that we just cling to as being me, these things become crystallized, and that's when they become fully unconscious, and that's where we have the habit that develop, the habit patterns. And bhava is also a word for being or existing. Depending on how I will want to teach dependent origination. I would usually call this identity also. And this identity is nothing but just a bundle of attachments. What's identity? That's it. It's just a bundle of attachments that came from discontent. We're not okay with what we have now. We want this, we want that. We don't want this, we don't want that. By the way, not wanting something is still wanting. It's just wanting not. So it's still wanting. So it's the same thing. We're not okay. There's the pull pulling us out of this. And as we do this, it gets crystallized, and this false sense of personality, personhood, identity is just a bundle of attachment. And when we start digging deeper into the meditation, this is becoming more and more and more clear that, this is basically just an illusion. I'm not this. What is this? This is arising and passing away. This is just a perception. This is a taste. This is an experience. My experience now is different than earlier when I was having a tea, and it's just flowing with every word that I say, basically, with every word that you're hearing. It's the same thing. And that ties into the anicca sanya that the Buddha talks about, the perception of impermanence at the beginning of this talk. What is the cause for wanting? Now, this craving, personally I feel like craving is a bit of a strong word for what tanha can be, because tanha can be very, very, very subtle. And craving for me is just this, I see a monster like this, That's just like basically wants to eat everything on its path. But tanha is very subtle. It's like this slight pull. And so what's causing this? So what's the cause for having this? Feeling, yes. Felt experiences or experience, that's what I like to call it. Everything that we experience, that we feel, but everything that is felt and experienced, this discontent will arise from that. It has no other way of arising. If we didn't experience, for example, taste, there wouldn't be a wanting for a specific kind of tea or a specific kind of whatever tea or coffee or so without the taste buds, that's impossible. So whatever we experience, whether it be the body, whether it be visual, whether it be auditive, whether it be the tongue, or what am I forgetting? The nose. Then any of these experiences this is what the ground for discontent is. This is where it arises from. What is the cause for all felt experiences? Or feeling? Contact. Yes. Sensory contact, basically. Now, I forgot to say that basically on your little chart, maybe write down above suffering, writing trouble, and then above, because there will be an exam. Okay, here I am. Okay, so above habitual tendencies or bhava, right blind reactions. Oh no, sorry, that was a jati, yes. Jati, birth of action. Above bhava, above habitual tendencies, then right habit patterns. Above clinging, upadana, right attachments. Above craving, right wanting. Above feeling, right felt experience. Okay, and now I'll try to remember so that we can all write down. And then we'll, this is something that Bhante used to do pretty much every retreat. Is we're going to say it all together and repeat it so that we're breaking it down right now, but we'll make it as a summary in the end. So sensory contact should be answered, but this sensory contact comes from a cause. It is not independent. What is the cause for contact? Yes, the sixth sense basis. The six senses here is what I have. So above the sixfold base, I'm not sure what is written on the chart right now, but the six senses is what we're... Okay, six senses, good. Then what is the cause for the six senses? Yes, so here I will be saying mind and body. And once again, I just want to repeat this disclaimer that these words, I'm not saying that the other ones are not good. I'm just offering you my own perspective on this. So, And mind and body, what is the cause for mind and body? Consciousness. Basically, this consciousness, this nama rupa, this mind and body or materiality, mentality, could not arise if there was not the consciousness that would migrate, basically, into another body, another set of conditions. And this is where the Buddha, in some ways that he will explain this, this sequence, is also that nama, rupa, and vijnana, mind and body and consciousness, this is where it also can turn back on itself, basically. So one is dependent on the other, like two stacks of kusa grass. If you take one away, the other one falls, basically. There cannot be a mind and body without consciousness, and there cannot be consciousness without mind and body, basically. I really like these new findings that they're doing in science, where they're actually starting to understand that the brain is not just the one place where there's consciousness. It seems to, yes, be a very a hot spot for consciousness, obviously. But we have a whole big nervous system that goes all the way through the body, and this is interrelated. Like there's even, there's not just information going from the brain to the body, but there's the body is also informing intelligently the brain about what's going on. And there's ways of working with the body that actually affect mind, basically. So this mind and body complex is very, nama rupa is very closely intertwined. And when we speak of consciousness here, it simply means that first there needs to be that, remember I was explaining that bundle of that identity that has all this karmic baggage that goes from one lifetime to the next. Well, there needs to be that. There needs to be consciousness. And that's the next step we're going to talk about, is how that consciousness is fabricated, basically. But first, to have a mind and body complex, there needs to be a consciousness that migrates into that mind and body complex, basically. Okay, good. What is the cause of consciousness? Formations, yes. And here I use the word mental activities, or sometimes mental processes. And this is where it gets really, really interesting. And that's why I like this particular section of dependent origination, because understanding dependent origination is very important. But understanding it in the proper way is also very important. And this, at this level also, is where a lot of understanding needs to happen. And especially with the advanced practice, there's a lot of people in the quiet mind right now spending a long time with this. And this is where we're going to start seeing that this consciousness is actually like a hologram. It is fabricated. It's like a holographic creation that happens through trillions of mental activities or processes that have been downloaded, installed, and input into our psyche, basically, voluntarily, through the branches of tanha, the wanting, the attachment, the habit patterns, yes, or identity, basically, arising, making a me out of this. And then this me is already crystallized. And basically what it makes is that this ties back into the beginning of the cycle. So these blind reactions, these are the sankharas also that arise. And the coarser the reactions, the coarser the sankharas that arise, basically. there's all kinds of ways of understanding this dependent origination. It's pretty profound, actually. And at this level, we'll start to see that actually consciousness, and this is where neither perception or non-perception happens, what I like to call the limit of awareness, is that consciousness is made up of trillions of mental activities that arise and pass away extremely fast. And there's no chance that we're going to see that in our regular waking life. Basically, that would be very fortuitous, I would say. But at the deepest level of this meditation, that's where people start to experience that this consciousness, or this bundle that we call consciousness, is actually fully fabricated, because you can calm it down, you can release it, and you can fully let it go. And there's a point where it will completely go offline, basically. That's where and it's impossible to be aware of this, because that's what it means to let go, to break down consciousness, basically, it means that there will not be consciousness anymore. So it's often there's a question, but what is aware of consciousness? There's nothing aware of consciousness. Consciousness is the thing that is aware. So, because there's a lot of theories and understanding in different traditions that think that there's something behind that's always aware. But in the Buddha's teaching, that's wrong view. That is implying an eternal self that is constantly aware. And that's the genius of the Buddha, is that he saw through that. He punched through that with his wisdom. And he saw that there was something much deeper, that actually, no, consciousness is fabricated. So, vijnana, sankhara paccaya vijnana. So basically, these mental activities is what creates consciousness. And the thing is, we have it fully backwards. We think that consciousness holds all of these mental activities in the mind, but it's not true. It's actually all these mental activities are creating that consciousness. So when we take off the mental activities, so basically one of the stanzas that describes what Nibbana means in the suttas is etang santang, etang panidang, yadidang sabba sankhara samato, sabuppadi patinissago, tanha kayo, virago nirodo nibbanam. That means etang santang, etang panidang, this is peaceful, this is sublime, yadidang sabba sankhara samato, the complete tranquilization or complete letting go of all mental activity. And this is where we really need to understand what that concept of Nibbana is. And this is where we can have this experience where the Buddha says you can let go of all these sankharas. You can let go of all these mental activities. And in neither perception or non-perception, one is balancing the 7 supports of awakening. One side is more energizing, more taking interest in your object of meditation, not becoming dull, using awareness to see and taking interest into that final stage of neither perception or non-perception, and applying the mind towards that. But if we overdo that, then there's restlessness arising. And for those of you who are experiencing that, you'll probably be familiar. There's one way or the other. It's walking like a tightrope. You're either going to lose interest or have too much interest. So either there's going to be a little bit of restlessness, or either there's going to be a little bit of boredom, or just the mind is going like, dull. And it's a really, really fine line. It's walking like a tightrope like this. And it's aligning and purifying all the 7 supports of awakening until awareness itself is so purified from any mental activity that it dissipates. It goes in the background and then, it comes back again. And there's this, hey, I am here. Hey, I'm back. Or, hey, I was gone for a little bit. And the only way you can see that is when you come back, basically. Because you can't see that. When you let go of awareness in this very wise way, using discernment to let go of the tiny little mental movements that arise, then it's purifying the mind at the deepest level, and it's rewiring the whole mental psyche at the deepest level to actually 6R at that point, even when the tiniest bit of mental activity that comes back, then using that awareness that I am, hey, I'm back, or just I, or being, to use that and see, oh, right, this is what happened, and 6R that even. 6R whatever happened before, or whatever the mind is looking to create even more, and to implement the 6Rs at the deepest level of your psyche, basically. And this is why when we talk about cessation in some suttas, it says, what does a mind leans and inclines and tends towards after cessation is like it leans and it tends and it inclines towards viveka, towards letting go, basically. Because one has cultivated the 6Rs, or right effort, letting go, to the deepest level of the psyche. And now that's the new software. That's the new operating system in the mind. There's still going to be things arising, because there's still going to be some past karmic actions. There's still going to be, unwholesome states arising. But deep in the mind, there's this new kind of seed. There's this new understanding that actually there's another way. There's another way to understand this reality, basically, and that is complete freedom. There is a place where all these sankharas, sabba sankharas samato, all these sankharas are tranquilized, and there is the extinguishing of consciousness, basically. Like was it the Mahatanha Sankhya, the destruction of craving, where there's a specific kind of fire that burns on grass, there's a fire that burns on logs, there's a fire that burns on trash. It's fire, but it arises upon a cause and a condition. Consciousness is the same. It's exactly the same. It's just burning on whatever was before, accumulated. But when we take away all of the fuel for consciousness to arise, then it cannot arise. It doesn't have fuel. It doesn't have heat. It doesn't have fuel, and so it blows out. And this is what nibbana means. Sabuppadi patinisago. That basically the relinquishing of all these attachments that we have that create that sense of self. This is gone. It has to be completely gone. Of course, there's a few ways that the Buddha talked about nibbana. There is the blowing out of consciousness, that is at that level, the deepest level of paticcasamuppada, the dependent origination. When one lets go completely of all mental activities and processes, and then there's a blowing out of consciousness, because we're taking out its condition, its cause. And then there's also a more advanced kind of nibbana, which is the complete letting go of greed, hate, and delusion, lobha, dosa, moha. So, when we use the term nibbana, the Buddha himself used that analogy, that word, for different contexts. So we have to understand where it is. It doesn't mean that when one experiences cessation, for example, doesn't mean that they're an arhat. Doesn't mean that they've ended the path. But that means that they've experienced a kind of nibbana. Like in other suttas, the Buddha is asked, what is nibbana here and now? What is nibbana here and now? He says, well, when there is greed and greed gets to be abandoned, that is nibbana here and now. This is the extinguishing. So it can be also just when a hindrance arises. Basically, every time you're doing the 6 hours, you are nibbana-ing the mind. So you're verbing the nibbana. You're basically, this is what we've been doing this whole retreat. I'm just trying to remember where the train of thought was. Sabupadi patinisago tanha kayo. So the complete letting go of any kind of forward wanting, disliking, and all of that. Sabupadi patinisago tanha kayo viraga nirodho nibbana. Viraga, complete calming down, not being agitated, just complete calm. Nirodho, that is cessation, but it also can mean other things like being completely unobstructed, being completely clear. And nibbana, the blowing out, basically. This is one of the ways one can experience nibbana at the deepest level, basically, of dependent origination. Removing the causes for the fire of consciousness to arise. And so this is what many people have been doing. And what is the cause for mental activities to arise? Avijja, yes. So here I use the words lack of discernment. So I'm from the Western context, and when you tell people they're ignorant, it's not very skillful. So it tends to unfortunately draw a lot of people away from the teaching. So yeah. So now, isn't it great? Nobody's ignorant anymore. But there's lack of discernment. If you explain it properly, you can say, it's not just like you never went to school, you don't know anything, you're an ignorant. That's not what it means here. It means like not knowing the Four Noble Truths, not knowing dependent origination, not knowing the path. And basically, this is the ground for all of this to arise. And so this lack of discernment here, that's also looping back to this yatha bhutang jnana dassanam that I've mentioned earlier, that discernment. So here, see, it's all based, it's all rooted upon any kind of lacking of discernment that we might have, but there's a way up and there's a way out, and there's a way of developing discernment. And then when we do that, when we practice the path, then the whole chain of dependent origination gets weakened. So the lack of discernment becomes just very small. It becomes, it's still there, but it's not very strong. It's not like huge ignorance or, you have a lot more mindfulness. Basically, that's what it means. And then the mental activities that arise based upon that, they're very light. They're not very heavy. And then the consciousness that arises from these mental activities is also lighter. It still arises in that chain, but the whole chain becomes a lot lighter, a lot weaker, and then at some point we can actually break it and weaken it even further. So that's the strategy here. Okay, so now the exam, the test. So now we're all going to say, I'm going to say the first bit, like in this way, monks. Lack of discernment supports, and then you're going to say the next word, mental activities. Okay, so this was just the trial phase, and now we can start over again. Lack of discernment supports mental activities. Mental activities support consciousness supports Mind and body support. The six senses support. Contact supports. All felt experiences support. Wanting supports. Attachments support. Habit patterns support. Blind reactions support. Trouble supports. Faith, confidence, yes. There was not a lot of confidence in that one. It became all very quiet. So trouble supports. Good. Good. Confidence supports. Relief. Relief supports. Joy supports. Calm supports. Happiness supports. Mental collectedness supports. Discernment, very good. Discernment supports. Disengagement. Disengagement supports. Freedom from clinging. Freedom from clinging supports. Release or liberation. Release or liberation supports the knowledge of stillness or the destruction of the taints. So I think we have a group, maybe like a 75%. The exam, the note, the score. Yes. Luckily, there's a second try to the exam, so. So I'll just read this analogy. Just as when it pours down heavily on the mountaintops, that water rushes down, filling the main valleys and gorges. The main valleys and gorges being full, they fill the streams. The streams being full, they fill the creeks. The creeks being full, they fill the rivers. The rivers being full, they fill the estuaries. The estuaries being full, they fill the great ocean. In this way, monks, lack of discernment supports good. Mental activities support. Consciousness supports. Mind and body support. The six senses support. Sensory contact supports. All felt experiences support. Wanting supports. Attachments support. Habit patterns support. Blind reactions support. Trouble supports. Confidence supports. Yes, relief supports. Joy supports. Calm supports. Happiness supports. Collectedness supports. Discernment supports. Disengagement supports. Freedom from clinging supports. Release, yes, or liberation. Release supports the knowledge of stillness. Very good. And I missed my little bit here that I wanted to share. I like to end on a funny note, on a light note. So here's her poem. It's called Apple Store. And I think it's an actual word play, like store, like where it's all stored. So this is her experience of changing over to a new phone. When they offered to transfer my data from one phone to the next, they used the word migrate. First, the devices needed to speak. Both lay side by side in close proximity, as an intimate nesting. Energetically, they called out to each other, and through Bluetooth, a connection was made. My old device conjured a wild in-motion image, a vaguely circular vision of all my data bits and bytes. A 4-dimensional QR code of swirling motes, like some vast windstorm on Mars. Rolling as a murmuration, the whole flux spun clockwise. Its bulk of samsaric energy sucking any stragglers into its wake, dragged along through past patterning. A snapshot image of this consciousness, all my little datas, was captured by the new device body. Its open conditions set to accept all. These swirlings into its empty shell, and thus was born my new phone, as closely me as the internet knows. All previous preferences primed, all past desires reloaded. Ready to receive new input and synthesize it through the cloudy haze of my old patterning. So I think this is about it for me tonight. Maybe a little recap on basically the two sides of this dependent origination. Dependent origination is very useful to know, but it's only half of the Four Noble Truths. It's half of the path. It's half of wisdom. So we also want to know how to break out of this, and the upper part of dependent origination, the transcendental part. And that's what we've been practicing here. I would maybe ask another test. Can you tell me how this gladness to collectiveness sequence goes? In maybe like in English. From, let's say there's from the relief arising, then there's what? How does it feel to be relieved? Joy. Yeah, good. And then what does joy do to? Yeah, calm. And then how does it feel to be calm in the body? Happiness. And then collectiveness. Yes, so this is the way out. And mental collectiveness is what helps us see things, discern. Yeah. Otherwise, we couldn't see. We wouldn't have the capacity to see what our mind is doing, like Bhante Ananda would say, seeing how mind moves from one thing to another. We couldn't see that because we would have just the flying around mind. Okay, let's share some merits. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share these merits that we have thus acquired, for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty powers, share these merits of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.